At 67, I enrolled in an art class that met 3 mornings a week. I used the savings I had quietly set aside over many years to pay for the tuition. But the day I walked into the art center to register, I discovered something shocking. My entire bank account had been wiped clean. I immediately called my son. He responded calmly, almost dismissively, saying, "Oh, come on, Mom. Painting? At your age? What's the point? I used that money to buy Melissa a diamond necklace. It's her birthday today." Hearing those words, I felt a wave of helplessness, sorrow, and anger. I had spent my entire life worrying about and loving my son, and in the end, all I received in return was cold indifference and crushing disappointment. I stood there, stunned, before picking up the phone again. But this time, the call I made changed everything. Follow my story if you're curious and want to know what happened next. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more powerful and inspiring stories. At 65, I fell in love with painting, not to make a name for myself, not out of some grand ambition. I just wanted to reclaim something that belonged to me. I signed up for a community college art class. $15 a session 3 times a week. Seniors even got a discount. I thought the people closest to me would be supportive. Not a single one was. My son Brandon looked at me, brows furrowed. "Mom, 15 a class. Do you realize what you're spending in a week could cover a whole coding lesson for Noah?" Before I could respond, his wife Samantha, holding their toddler, chimed in. "Exactly. And if you're off at class 3 times a week, who's supposed to watch Noah? We both work, remember?" But the rail explosion came from my husband, Frank. Right there in front of the whole family, he slammed his mug against the kitchen counter. Porcelain shattered, and his voice thundered through the room. "You're 65, and you're still messing around with this kind of nonsense? If you go through with this damn art class, we're getting a divorce." I didn't say a word. I just looked at him, his eyes bloodshot with rage. This man who dropped $200 a session on cycling workshops like it was nothing, who went off on week-long bike tours and didn't even call home, and now that I wanted to do something just for me. For once, he acted like the world was ending. In that moment, something shifted. I stared back at him, my voice calm as still water. "All right, let's get a divorce." Lately, I've fallen in love with painting. There's something magical about it. How a few strokes can bring the landscapes in your mind to life. It felt like someone had opened a window I never even knew existed, and suddenly, light was pouring into places I hadn't seen in years. Linda Harper, my closest friend for decades, had been taking classes at a senior learning center near the coast. One afternoon over tea, she mentioned the art center had just launched a new painting course. $15 a class, Marilyn, she said, eyes twinkling, and if you sign up for more than 1 month, they even knock off a few dollars. I was tempted right away. It wasn't just the class. It was the idea that I could still begin something at 65, not out of obligation, not because someone needed me to, but because I wanted to. As soon as I got home, I shared the news with my family, practically glowing with excitement. "I want to enroll in that painting class Linda mentioned. It's at the community college near the beach. $15 a session, 3 times a week, morning classes from 9 to noon, and if I miss one, there's a makeup session in the afternoon from 3 to 5. I had already filled out the registration form. The teacher, a young woman named Rachel Monroe, said I could start as soon as next week. I was serious, maybe even a little giddy, but the moment I looked up from my paperwork, the energy in the room shifted like a cold wind had blown in through the window. Brandon spoke first. "Mom, $15 a session isn't cheap. 3 times a week, that's thousands a year. That's money we could put toward Noah's coding classes." He paused, then added with a hint of reproach, "The economy's tight right now." "We're already stretched. Can you not waste money on stuff like this?" They asked about my dreams. They complimented my work. They remembered my stories and cried with me when I shared them. It was like being seen for the first time in my life, and the more I painted, the more I healed. I started exploring themes I had never dared to before: grief, forgiveness, rage, freedom. My latest collection was titled After the Silence. Each canvas told a piece of my story, and at the center of the gallery hung the piece that started it all, becoming the same dark vines, the same sliver of golden light, but this time the woman in the painting wasn't curled up anymore. She was standing. One afternoon, as I prepped for a community art class, there was a knock at the studio door. Linda opened it, and there stood Brandon, older, tired, a hint of humility in his eyes I'd never seen before. He looked down at the ground, then back at me. "Mom," he said, his voice small, "I saw your interview last week, the part where you talked about me. You didn't even say my name, but I knew." I nodded slowly. He swallowed hard. "You were right. About everything. And I didn't come here to ask for anything. I just wanted you to know I finally get it." I studied him for a long moment. I didn't hug him, but I didn't shut the door either. "Thank you," I said. "That's all." That night, I sat on my porch, a cup of chamomile tea in one hand, a sketchbook in the other. The air was cool. The stars shimmered overhead. Linda sat beside me, humming an old jazz tune. And I smiled, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't someone's wife. I wasn't someone's mother. I wasn't someone's errand runner or cook or cleaning lady. I was Marilyn Carter, artist, teacher, survivor. I had nothing left to prove and everything left to create. Final message to the audience. If you're listening to this and thinking, it's too late for me, let me tell you something. It's not. Whether you're 30, 50, or 75, you deserve a life that belongs to you. You deserve rest, joy, and dreams that don't come second to everyone else's. You deserve to be more than just a role. You deserve to be. So go pick up that brush. Go take that class. Go book that flight. And if anyone calls you selfish, smile and say, "Finally." If this story moved you, don't forget to leave a comment below. Share your story, your dream, or just your name, so we can say we see you. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more true, powerful stories like this one. You're not alone. We're all becoming together. I gave it up while I was breastfeeding and scrubbing floors. While you were off on business trips, I was chasing a toddler and working nights just to cover groceries. I gave it up because someone had to. And you let it be me. His jaw clenched, but still, he said nothing. Don't rewrite the past. You know exactly why I stopped painting, and it wasn't because I lost interest. It was because I didn't have permission to care about anything that wasn't you or Brandon or bills or laundry. He took a breath. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, I snapped. And now you're here, telling me you would have supported me? You spent 40 years treating my dreams like they were clutter, and when I finally found the courage to pick them back up, you tried to crush them. He lowered his head. I sighed, the weight of the past still heavy in my lungs. "I'll keep sending the divorce papers, Frank. When you're ready, sign them." He looked up, eyes wet now. "You're really never coming back?" I looked around, at my painting, at the crowd gathered around it, at the staffers whispering about me, not you, at the women who clutched their programs to their chests and wiped tears from their faces after hearing my speech. "No," I said, "I already did my time." 2 years passed in the blink of an eye. 2 years of legal separation, of divorce filings returned unsigned, of me mailing a fresh set of papers every month, each time with a sticky note attached, not bitter, just firm. "You asked for this." I agreed. "Let's finish it." Frank never responded, not directly, but slowly he stopped trying to argue. The calls stopped, the emails dried up, the threats faded into silence. And finally, on a quiet Wednesday in late spring, a letter arrived. Inside it, a single sheet of paper, signed, dated, finalized. After 4 decades of marriage, it was over, and I didn't feel grief. I felt relief. I felt peace. In those 2 years, I rebuilt my life, piece by precious piece. I launched my YouTube channel, Painting Grandma, Rachel Monroe helped me record my process, edit tutorials, and share stories between brushstrokes. Linda helped manage the comment section, replying to kind strangers and flagging the trolls before they had a chance to fester. At first, it was just a small group of loyal viewers, women mostly, retirees, empty nesters, a few curious teenagers. But soon, the channel grew and grew, 500,000 subscribers, then 1 million, then 2. Each video opened with the same line. "Welcome back, darlings. Let's paint something from the heart today." And people loved it, not because I was a master painter, but because I was honest. I showed the smudges, the mistakes, the moments I cried mid-canvas because a color reminded me of something I'd buried years ago. I showed the joy, the quiet triumph of finishing something that was mine. One of the most viral videos was titled, "What Happens When You Stop Apologizing and Start Living?" That one reached over 15 million views. Art galleries took notice. One in San Francisco offered me a solo exhibition, then Boston, then Seattle. Critics called my work a blend of emotional realism and mature rebellion. I called it healing. I never chased fame, but somehow it found me anyway. And Brandon? Brandon didn't fare so well. After his stunt at the Feather Award ceremony, the story resurfaced. Clips circulated of him grabbing my arm backstage, trying to convince a staff member I was delusional. Comments shredded him. "Your mom just won the most prestigious senior art award in the country, and you tried to drag her off stage? Pathetic. Imagine your greatest legacy being that you underestimated your own mother." No wonder she cut ties. His employer opened a formal investigation. He was fired, again. By then, Samantha had reached her breaking point. She packed up, took Noah, and filed for divorce. That left Brandon alone, and that's when the messages started. Not public ones. No, he knew better now. These were emails. Quiet, desperate. "Mom, I messed up. I know that now. Everything fell apart. I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know who I am anymore. Could we talk?" I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, but because I needed him to sit with the emptiness he'd created. For the first time in his life, he had to live without a net, without someone cleaning up after him, without someone carrying the burden he refused to acknowledge. Sometimes the only way to learn is by being left alone with the mess. Linda and I, meanwhile, kept growing. We hosted art retreats for women over 50, weekend getaways in the mountains, wine, laughter, painting by the lake, women who had raised families, buried dreams, and were now finally giving themselves permission to be. And I found something else I never expected. Friendship. Deep, soul-nourishing friendship with women who didn't see me as a role, but as a person. Their stunned silence was the sweetest applause I had ever heard. Backstage, I changed into my navy blue dress, touched up my lipstick, and straightened my shoulders in the mirror. I didn't feel nervous. I felt ready. Brandon showed up one last time, right as the announcer called my name for the third time. Winner of the 2024 Feather Award, Ms. Marilyn Carter, please come to the stage. He grabbed my arm. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "You can't actually go out there. They'll laugh you off the stage." His grip tightened. "You're going to humiliate yourself." Before I could say a word, a staffer rushed up. "Ms. Carter, we've been looking for you." Brandon stepped in front of him. "That's my mom. She's confused. She thinks she won. It's been hard." The staffer frowned, confused. "Sir, that is Marilyn Carter. Look, her name's in the program." He handed Brandon a booklet with my photo printed in full color on the inside cover. Brandon paled. His fingers released my arm. You really won?" I didn't answer. I walked past him and onto the stage, my heels tapping against polished wood, 1,000 eyes watching me. They placed the award in my hands. The lights beamed warm and bright. I smiled. And in the audience, Frank sat frozen, staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time in decades, like the man who once told me, "You'll never be anything more than a housewife," had just realized he'd been wrong. I stood behind the podium, the Feather Award cradled in my arms. The applause faded, and for a moment, all I could hear was the faint hum of the overhead lights and the slow, steady beat of my heart. Then I began to speak. "I never expected this," I said, my voice soft but unwavering. Not because I didn't believe in my painting, but because I spent decades being told not to believe in myself. There was a hush in the room. When I was 20, I carried a set of second-hand brushes in a grocery bag. I worked 2 jobs, factory by day, diner by night, and painted from 2 to 4 in the morning. That was my time. That was when I lived, and then I fell in love. Got married, had a son. The brushes went into a box, tucked away beside old keepsakes and promises I thought would never expire. I don't blame anyone for that, not entirely, but I mourned it. Every year that passed, I became more and more invisible, first to the world, then to my husband, eventually even to myself. I paused and looked out into the crowd. In the second row, I spotted a woman in her 70s, eyes glistening. Next to her, a middle-aged man held her hand. I imagined what they'd been through, how many versions of this story had played out in homes across the country. My family believed I had no purpose once they didn't need something from me, that once the laundry was folded, the dishes put away, and the baby rocked to sleep, I could quietly vanish, that I should vanish. The auditorium remained still, but one day I picked up a brush again, and in that moment the silence cracked. I remembered who I was, and more importantly, who I still could be. Applause started slowly, then grew, but I held up a hand gently. I'm not special. I'm just someone who finally said, no more. No more erasing ourselves. No more apologizing for taking up space. No more guilt for wanting something of our own. I looked directly into the cameras, knowing full well this would reach far beyond this room. To every woman watching, whether you're 35 or 85, you are allowed to begin again. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to become. I left the stage to a standing ovation. As I stepped into the wings, Rachel met me with open arms. Her voice was hoarse with emotion. "You didn't just win an award, Marilyn," she whispered. "You gave us a revolution." Later that evening, as I stood alone near the gallery exhibit showcasing all the finalists' work, someone approached me. It was Frank. He looked older than I remembered, or maybe it was the way his shoulders slumped, his eyes sunken in. He wasn't the man who had thrown a mug across the kitchen or stormed down hallways yelling. He was quiet, small. "Congratulations," he said softly. "You always did love painting. I guess this means you finally got what you wanted." I studied him for a moment. Then he added, voice low and nostalgic, "I still remember the first time I saw you in that little gallery. You were holding a brush like it was an extension of your soul. You were lit from the inside." He sighed. "If only you hadn't given it up back then. If you'd kept going, I swear I never would have stood in your way." And that was the moment I couldn't stay silent. I turned to him, my expression even but cold. "Frank, do you really not know why I gave it up?" His mouth opened slightly, but I didn't give him the chance to answer. "You barely bring in a dime," he snapped. "Don't lecture me about priorities." So much for their united front. When I stepped away from their lives, I had stopped being the scapegoat, and without me to carry the weight, they turned on each other. Meanwhile, I kept painting. Rachel Monroe, my teacher, couldn't stop smiling every time I walked in. "You've got fire in your work now," she told me. "Whatever you're feeling, keep channeling it." So I did. I poured every emotion into my art. Freedom, grief, relief, rage. And then I got a message I never expected. An invitation to speak. A women's empowerment conference wanted me to give the opening address. Me, a 65-year-old woman who hadn't even known how to edit a video 2 months ago. Linda screamed when I told her. "Marilyn Carter," she shouted, grabbing my cheeks. "You're going to stand on a stage and tell the whole damn world the truth. I could die happy." And I did tell them. I stood in a room full of women, and I said, "If your children only see you as a babysitter, remind them that you were once a woman with dreams. If your husband mocks your passions, ask yourself what he gave up for you." And if no one claps for your painting, paint anyway. They gave me a standing ovation, not because I was anyone special, but because I was finally myself. That fall, something extraordinary happened. I won. The Feather Award. Rachel Monroe called me personally, her voice shaking with excitement. "Marilyn," she said, barely able to contain herself. "You won first place. First place. Out of hundreds of applicants. I knew it. I just knew this award had your name on it." I stood in Linda's kitchen, holding the phone in one hand and a dish towel in the other, stunned. For a moment, I didn't breathe. I didn't even blink. The world just paused. Then the tears came. Not from sadness, not from regret, from validation. For once in my life, I hadn't just done something good. I had done something right. The ceremony was to be held at the Downtown Arts Hall, a large modern space with white marble columns, crimson velvet curtains, and rows of seats that seemed to stretch on for miles. Linda insisted we arrive early. "We are not missing 1 second of your spotlight," she said, pinning a silk scarf around my shoulders. When we got there, she bolted toward the volunteer desk. "I'll help pass out brochures," she declared proudly, grabbing a name badge like she'd been rehearsing for years. "I want to be there when they say your name." I laughed. "You'll be front row," I promised. While she ducked into the restroom to change into her vest, I stood near the entrance, casually helping a few guests pick up their programs. That's when I saw him. Brandon. He was walking toward me, clipboard in hand, a staff lanyard around his neck. Apparently, his new job was in event support, and he had been assigned to PR for the Feather Awards. Next to him, of course, was Frank. Apparently, there had been a ticketing error, and Brandon had decided to bring Frank along at the last minute. The universe has a twisted sense of humor. Brandon saw me first. He stopped cold, his mouth curled into a crooked grin. "Mom." "What are you doing here?" he asked, looking me up and down. His eyes caught the volunteer badge. "Volunteering now? They giving out free meals with this gig or something?" He laughed like he was joking, like he still had any power over me. "You couldn't make it on your own, huh?" he continued, snorting. "Told you couldn't survive without us. Look at you, scraping by, handing out flyers while someone else wins the award." Then he added with a sneer, "Some old lady won this year." "Last name? Carter. You picked a good night to beg." Behind him, Frank looked uncomfortable, like he had stepped in something sour. He sighed and muttered, "Last time I saw you rambling about painting, I almost thought you were serious. But this?" Then he reached out and patted me on the forehead, like I was a child. "No fever," he said mockingly. "So what's your excuse?" I gave them a smile. Not a warm one, not a forgiving one, a knowing smile, the kind that says, "You're about to eat every word you just said." "Did it ever occur to you," I said, "that the 65-year-old woman named Carter might be me?" They froze. Brandon's mouth opened, then closed again. Frank blinked like someone had slapped him. Brandon recovered first. "You're kidding. You? Come on, Mom. You couldn't even draw stick figures when I was in middle school." Frank chuckled, low and patronizing. "You fooled a few seniors at the community center. Fine. But the Feather Award? This is for real artists. You're out of your league." I didn't respond. Not with words. At that moment, my phone buzzed. It was a committee member. "Miss Carter, the program's about to begin. Please make your way backstage." I turned back to them. "You'll want to find a seat," I said, "and keep your eyes on the stage." Then I walked away. I would use the truth to reclaim it. Linda walked in just as I opened my laptop. "I'm starting a channel," I said. She paused, raising a brow. "You know how?" "Rachel does," I smiled. "She's going to help me." That evening, I sat in front of a cheap ring light Rachel lent me and recorded my first video. I called it, "Why I Left, from a Mother Who Gave Everything." In it, I didn't rant. I didn't yell. I told my story. I talked about the quiet years, the dinners, the fevers, the missed doctor appointments because someone had to stay home, the backaches from lifting, The loneliness of caring for everyone while no one noticed you were slowly disappearing. I held up my paintbrush and said, "This doesn't make me selfish. It makes me alive." And at the end, I spoke directly to the camera. To every woman watching this, it's never too late to start again. Whether you're 30, 40, or like me, 65, you have the right to reclaim your life, to become again. Rachel helped me edit the footage, clean cuts, soft piano music, warm lighting, subtitles for accessibility. We uploaded the video to YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. I went to bed with a quiet heart. The next morning, everything had changed. By sunrise, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I wasn't even sure what the noise was at first. It had been so long since I'd gotten more than a handful of notifications in a single day, but now it vibrated like a heartbeat, constant, urgent, relentless. The video had gone viral, not just a few shares viral, front page of Twitter, trending on TikTok, 200,000 comments in 8 hours viral. It exploded overnight. By mid-morning, the number of views had soared past 3 million. Linda burst into the living room, waving her phone in the air like a victory flag. "Marilyn!" she shouted, practically shaking. "You're all over the internet. Everyone is talking about you. They love you." I stared at her in disbelief, but when I opened the app, the truth was staring back at me. The painting grandma who fought back. She gave her life for her family, then they threw her out. Marilyn Carter, 65, shows the world it's never too late. The comments flooded in, waves of empathy and fury, this time not directed at me. "This is heartbreaking. She was used like a maid and then tossed aside the second she wanted to breathe." My mom saw this and cried. She said it reminded her of everything she gave up. Her son made that whole fake sob story video, and now we see the truth. She deserves better. I'm sending this to every woman over 50 I know. One message stood out, a private DM from a woman in her late 50s. "If I hadn't seen your video, I think I would have stayed trapped forever. I didn't know I could leave. Thank you." That one broke me. I cried. I cried for her, for me, for every woman who gave up everything and was told it still wasn't enough. And in that moment, I realized this story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every woman who had ever been forgotten in the house she built. It belonged to every grandmother raising grandkids without thanks. Every wife whose dreams were shelved so her husband could keep chasing his. Every mother whose name was only remembered when a meal wasn't on the table. I had just wanted a little time with a paintbrush. Now I had a microphone and a million voices behind me. But as the world rallied around me, the walls began to close in on Brandon. His original video, where he'd painted himself as the pitiful son abandoned by a selfish mother, was ripped apart by the internet. Wait a minute, isn't this the guy whose mom went viral for standing up for herself? Funny how he left that part out. He called her just a housewife? Man, I hope she leaves him off her will. And then the real storm hit. You see, Brandon had posted the original sympathy video using his company's media account, a PR agency that prided itself on authentic storytelling. Well, the irony wasn't lost on the public. Comments flooded the company's page. Angry emails poured into the CEO's inbox. Employees started whispering about that Carter guy behind closed doors. By Friday, he was placed on leave. By Monday, he was fired. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt sad. Not for him, but for the boy I once raised, the one who used to draw dinosaurs with me in sidewalk chalk, the one who cried when I was late to pick him up from school. Somewhere along the way, he had learned how to weaponize people's kindness, and he had used that lesson against me. At home, things only got worse. Samantha was at her limit. With Brandon unemployed, bills piling up, and no one else to blame, the fight started, and they didn't stop. I heard through neighbors that Frank refused to give up his $200 cycling classes. Brandon begged him, shouted at him, "You're still spending like we've got 2 incomes. Noah's school bills are due. What are you training for, the Olympics?" Frank, of course, didn't back down. For a second, he looked like a child caught in a lie. His face froze. His hand, once so firm on my wrist, slowly dropped away. Linda snorted and grabbed mine instead. "Funny, isn't it?" she said. "You had a wife and didn't know how to treat her. Now she's gone, and you act like you're the one who's been abandoned." That week, I used the cash to re-enroll in Rachel Monroe's painting class. This time, I paid in person, in full, in cash, and I painted with even more focus than before. Each session felt like breath returning to my lungs. Each brushstroke was a piece of myself I thought I'd lost. And then, one afternoon, Rachel pulled me aside. "Marilyn," she said, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder, "I want to recommend you for the Feather Award competition. It's a respected program, open theme, no age limit. I think you should go for it." I froze. "Me?" Rachel smiled. "Age doesn't matter when the work speaks." That night, I sat with Linda on the patio. The wind was soft, the tea was warm, and I whispered, "I think I'm going to do it." She grinned. "Damn right you are." I spent the next 2 weeks working on my piece. The theme was open, and for days I struggled to settle on an idea. But late one evening, as I stood in front of the canvas with the moonlight spilling through Linda's kitchen window, the word came to me like a whisper. Metamorphosis. That was the word. The only word that made sense. I didn't want to paint something pretty. I didn't want a calm sunset or a blooming flower. I wanted honesty, rawness, something that felt like the truth. So I painted a woman, her form tangled in thick dark vines, her mouth open in a silent scream. Her limbs curled, strained, almost breaking, but not quite. The entire canvas was swallowed in black and deep indigo, except for one sliver of golden light in the top left corner. A crack in the darkness. The woman's eyes, though desperate, never looked away from that light. That light was me. It was the woman I had once been, the girl I used to be before the marriage, the laundry, the endless weight of everyone else's needs. I called the piece Becoming. When Linda came into the studio to see it, she stopped in her tracks. She didn't say a word for a long time, just stood there, hands trembling slightly around her mug of tea. Then she reached up and wiped tears from her cheeks. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "Marilyn, I see you. I really see you." That moment, her words, it was the warmest thing I'd felt in years. But just because I was growing didn't mean life had become simple. Brandon and Frank kept calling like clockwork. Sometimes Brandon would try the guilt trip. "Mom, please, come home. This place doesn't function without you. Noah has no one to pick him up. The house is falling apart. We need you. We miss you." Other times, the mask would drop and his voice would curdle into venom. "You're seriously this selfish. You've always been a housewife. What's this crap about personal fulfillment? You think anyone cares about a painting grandma?" I didn't respond to a single call. Not one. Instead, each time, I mailed a new copy of the divorce papers. On the day I mailed the 39th copy, Brandon snapped. He called me, voice shaking with rage. "Mom, what the hell are you trying to prove? Do you even realize what this divorce has done to our family? You want to make us miserable? Fine, but don't expect us to make it easy for you either." I didn't think much of it until the next morning. That's when I saw it, the viral video. My 65-year-old mother abandoned her family to chase a painting dream. What should my dad and I do? The thumbnail showed Brandon with dark circles under his eyes, looking unkempt and exhausted. He sat beside Frank, who was wrapped in a blanket staring blankly out a window. "My mom," Brandon began, his voice cracking, "said she wanted to become an artist. She didn't care about her family. She walked out, left my dad heartbroken. He's barely functioning. His blood pressure's gone through the roof. We don't know what to do." He dabbed at his eyes with a tissue, then added, "She said we were holding her back." That she needed space. "My wife and I are drowning. We have no help, no support. Please, internet, what would you do?" The video spread like wildfire. Brandon had always been a social media junkie. And now, playing the pitiful son worked like a charm. The comments poured in. "Poor guy. His mom sounds like a narcissist." My mother did the same thing, retired, then ran off to find herself. Meanwhile, I'm here with 2 kids and no backup. Some women just forget their place. I sat on Linda's couch, hands shaking, as the screen filled with strangers dragging my name through the mud. It felt like drowning, except you're the only one gasping, while the world cheers the wave. They didn't know the truth, but I did, and something inside me, something that used to shrink, stood up. Brandon had used the internet to shape the story. It wasn't just the compliment, it was the way she said it, like she saw me, not just as a grandmother, not just as a housewife, but as an artist. Meanwhile, Diana kept the divorce process moving. "You've been married a long time," she told me. "There's a lot of shared property, a lot of entanglements. If it goes to court, this could drag on for a year, maybe 2. I was prepared for that. What I wasn't prepared for was how fast they struck back. That day, I walked into the campus building like always, humming quietly under my breath. The front desk receptionist smiled at me as I approached, but something in her eyes was off, gentle, but apologetic. "Mrs. Carter," she began, "I'm really sorry, but your enrollment's been canceled. The tuition's already been refunded to your account." I blinked. "What? Canceled? Why?" She fidgeted. "Your family came in earlier this morning. They said you only signed up on a whim, that someone your age couldn't commit to a weekly course and would eventually drop out. They even threatened to call the police if we didn't process the refund." The words stung. I looked down at my hands that had finally found purpose again, steadying themselves in every careful stroke. Now they trembled. "They said we were taking advantage of an elderly woman's poor judgment," the receptionist added, clearly uncomfortable. "We were put in a tough spot. I hope you understand." Through the glass doors, I saw them, Frank and Brandon, standing together outside like vultures waiting for a carcass. Brandon caught sight of me and strolled over, that smug grin plastered across his face. "Mom, class is over. Let's head home." Frank stood beside him, arms folded, his usual scowl deepening. "If my son hadn't come up with this plan, who knows how long you would have kept wasting time." I clenched my jaw, my fingers curled into fists, and then something rose inside me, not rage, but clarity. I looked Brandon square in the eye. "Who told you I was going home with you?" He blinked. "Mom, the money's already refunded. No need to make a scene." "Where's the money?" I asked, my voice sharp. Brandon hesitated. "Amber saw the deposit. Things have been tense lately. She insisted I use it to buy her a necklace, a peace offering." He chuckled like it was a joke. "Come on, we're family. Let's not nitpick over little stuff." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, sure. When you want something from me, we're family. But when I want something for myself, suddenly I'm selfish and irresponsible?" I didn't waste another second. I pulled out my phone and dialed 3 numbers. "Yes, I'd like to report financial theft. Yes, it was my son. He accessed a refund from my private account without consent." They laughed at first, but they weren't laughing at the police station. Brandon stammered, trying to explain how it was just a misunderstanding. Frank stayed silent, stone-faced beside him. "She's my mom," Brandon insisted to the officer. "What's hers is mine. It's not like she was going to use the money for anything serious." The officer raised an eyebrow. "You spent her refund on a gift for your wife?" "Yeah," Brandon shrugged. "She's 70. What's she going to do, open a gallery?" I didn't flinch. Instead, I calmly handed over the documents, the art class receipt, the text confirmations, the voicemail Frank left threatening me. Then I called Linda. Within 15 minutes, she stormed into the precinct like a lioness. She walked right up to Brandon, grabbed him by the collar of his neatly ironed shirt, and said with quiet steel, "You used my money." Brandon's eyes widened. "What? I thought it was hers. Go after her." And just like that, 30 years of motherhood came crashing into a single moment. Watching my son deflect, squirm, and throw me under the bus to save himself, I realized something. He didn't see me as a person. He saw me as a resource, a convenience. Linda didn't even blink. "You used the money. You bought the necklace. Now you pay me back, or I'll make sure you're on every elder abuse record in this state." Brandon finally relented. Slowly, reluctantly, he went to the ATM and withdrew the full amount. He handed me the cash, not meeting my eyes. I took it without a word. Then I leaned in, smiled gently, and said, "Brandon, aren't we family?" No need to nitpick over little stuff. His face turned crimson. Funny how people only understand hurt when they're on the receiving end. As we walked out of the station, Frank finally broke his silence. "Fine, you got your little victory. Let's go home. Enough of this circus." I turned to face him, calm and resolute. "I'm not going home. I'm getting divorced." "Sign the papers, Frank," he snapped. "Divorce? That's all you ever say now. You've completely lost it." But I didn't flinch. "Frank," I said quietly, "you're the one who said divorce first." I just finally said yes. I turned and walked down the hall, past the laundry room I'd scrubbed 1,000 times, past the family portraits I'd straightened every holiday, and into the bedroom I had once called mine. I pulled out a suitcase, a small, soft-sided one I used to pack for weekend getaways we never took anymore. It barely held anything, just a few clothes, a framed photo of Linda and me from when we were in our 30s, and the beginner paintbrush set I'd ordered from a catalog years ago but never dared to use. That's when it hit me, how little I truly had to take with me. One suitcase, half full, just like my life. Decades had been poured into everyone else's needs, and now, in my 60s, I was left with scraps, exhaustion, silence, and one fragile thread of hope. Brandon tried to follow me, but Frank yanked him back. "She wants to act all high and mighty? Fine," he yelled. "Let her walk out. Let's see how long that useless woman lasts out there." Useless. I carried that word with me as I stepped out the door, down the driveway, and into Linda Harper's car. She had pulled up 10 minutes after I texted her, no questions asked. Just opened the passenger door and said, "Ready?" Linda was 5 years older than me, and 3 years ago, she had divorced her husband of 37 years. The breaking point? He slapped her during an argument over groceries. Back then, almost everyone said she was overreacting. It was just a slap, they said. You've made it through nearly 4 decades together, and that's what breaks you? I hadn't understood her choice at the time, but now, as the wind pressed against my face, and the house I had held together for most of my life disappeared behind us, I understood completely. When word got out that I was filing for divorce, the calls started pouring in like rain in hurricane season. "Marilyn, have you lost your mind? At your age, a divorce? That's just embarrassing. You're going to end up old and alone." I'd be lying if I said those words didn't sting. There were nights I sat in Linda's spare bedroom and stared at the ceiling, wondering if I had made a colossal mistake, wondering if I doomed myself to a lonely final chapter. But every time doubt crept in, Linda was there. She'd put on a kettle of chamomile tea, sit across from me on the floral couch, take my hand in hers and say, "Marilyn, it's actually really simple. You just have to ask yourself one question. Have you been happy these past few decades?" I looked down at my hands. They were rough, prepped, covered in calluses, hands that had scrubbed bathroom tile until my knuckles cracked, that had packed lunches, cleaned vomit, hauled laundry baskets like weights. There was a time when they were soft, when I used to spend hours dipping them into palettes of color, losing myself in brushstrokes that turned blank canvas into stories. A local gallery owner once told me, "You've got talent, Marilyn." But then came marriage, kids, mortgages, grocery lists, and suddenly those hands were shelved like my dreams. Back then, I used to think divorce was the end, that it meant failure. Now I understood. It was freedom, a door, an open road. I gave the best years of my life, I told Linda one night, to someone who didn't deserve them. Whatever time I have left, I'm keeping it for me. Linda smiled. That soft, knowing smile of a woman who'd been through the fire and made it out the other side. "I'll introduce you to my lawyer," she said. "Diana Griffin. She's sharp as hell, especially with women our age. These old men practically wet themselves when she walks into court. The very next morning, I called Diana. She was brisk, clear, all business, and exactly what I needed. I signed the paperwork that same week. 3 days later, Diana sent the first official notice of divorce to Frank. It didn't take long for the storm to hit. Frank called that night, his voice already raised before I could say a word. "Marilyn, have you lost your damn mind? Are you done playing your little game yet? Cancel that stupid art class right now. Get back here and start looking after Noah. If you turn around right now, I'll pretend none of this happened." In the background, I could hear Samantha yelling, Noah crying, something heavy crashing, ceramic maybe. I imagined the kitchen, chaotic and tense, the house falling apart without its glue. I took a quiet breath and said coolly, "If you have anything to say, speak to my lawyer. See you in court." Then I hung up. No hesitation. That Monday, I began my painting classes, just like I had dreamed, 3 sessions a week. I never missed a single one. Every day I painted. Every day I got better. Rachel Monroe, my instructor, couldn't help but smile. "Marilyn," she said one morning, after reviewing my latest canvas, "you've really got something. Your brushwork has more life than half the kids in here." That sentence lit up my entire week. I hadn't planned to argue. I hadn't expected to be met with this kind of cold arithmetic, but his words stung like lemon juice in a paper cut. Just last month, he had enrolled Noah in a cognitive development camp, $200 an hour, and boasted, "There's no better investment than the future." 10 of my painting classes didn't even cover 1 hour of that, so I looked him in the eye. "And why is it wasting money when it's my class?" Brandon tensed. "Come on, Mom. You can't compare yourself to a kid. He's still growing. This stuff actually matters. But what's the point? You planning to become a professional artist?" He gave a humorless laugh. "Be realistic. Cooking meals and helping with Noah is enough." That was when Samantha joined in. She gently patted Noah on the back as she spoke, soft-spoken but insistent. "And even if money wasn't an issue, if you're off at class every week, who's going to pick him up and drop him off? We both work, you know." I had already thought about that. My class times perfectly overlapped with Noah's preschool schedule. There was no conflict, but Samantha kept pushing, her brows drawn tight. "Can you guarantee you won't forget? What if there's an emergency? What if the school can't reach you?" Her voice was rising now. "So your little art dream is more important than your grandson? Are you really going to be that selfish? What kind of grandma does that?" I was stunned, just for a second completely at a loss. I turned to Frank, hoping, just hoping, for a flicker of understanding, a nod, a look, anything. Instead, he erupted. He grabbed the glass from the table and hurled it at the floor. The shatter was deafening. Water splashed, shards flew. "I've barely been home for a few days," he growled, standing up, "and already you're stirring up this crap." His eyes were dark, like the ocean before a storm. "You're 65, and you think now's the time to play around with painting? Don't turn your silly little hobbies into some kind of life mission." His breath was ragged, his finger jabbing the air toward me. "If you're really going to take this class, then we're done. You're out of this house." There they were, the 3 people I loved most in this world, one calling me wasteful, one calling me heartless, and one threatening to leave me altogether. I looked at them, and something inside me didn't just break, it collapsed. Not from grief, but from realization. Decades. I had spent decades doing the laundry, cooking the meals, raising the kids, sacrificing my passions, my time, my freedom, all of it. Apparently a joke, a bad one. "Fine," I said, voice steady. "Let's get a divorce." And the strangest thing, saying it felt light. For years, Frank had dangled that word, divorce, like a noose. Every argument, every disagreement, he'd bring it up, use it to break me, to silence me, and it used to work, because the very thought of growing old alone terrified me. I used to think, no matter how bad it gets, having someone there is better than being by yourself. But now I finally saw it. If companionship demands the death of who you are, then maybe solitude isn't so bad. He clearly didn't expect me to agree so easily. A flicker of panic flashed across Frank's face, though he tried to cover it with bluster. What? I'm wrong now. Look at you. You've lost your damn mind over some painting class. I let out a laugh. Sharp. Bitter. I've lost my mind? Really? What about you? You're out there spending $200 a pop on cycling classes, pedaling through storms like you're auditioning for the Tour de France, gone for weeks at a time, and you think that's normal? Tell me, Frank, when was the last time you actually took care of this family for even one day? My voice cracked halfway through. My eyes burned hot. Because I'm human, and yes, I feel hurt too. I've spent half a lifetime running this household, juggling everything, sacrificing everything, only to be told now that I don't even deserve a simple hobby. Brandon stepped forward then, his brow furrowed, his tone tense. Mom, how can you even compare yourself to Dad? He's worked his whole life, busted his back for this family. He just wants to enjoy himself a little now. Isn't that fair? He looked right at me. And you? You've been at home all this time doing nothing, and now suddenly you're chasing some dream? What right do you have? I stared at my son, the boy I raised, the boy I gave my life to, and as those words came out of his mouth, his face became unfamiliar. He didn't see me. Not really. Not the woman who stayed up folding his laundry, who sat at the kitchen table during scary midnight fevers, who dragged him to the factory where I did temp work because we couldn't afford childcare. He didn't remember the mother who slipped a disc in her back lifting boxes and never truly healed. None of that mattered now, because in his eyes, the father who popped in with toys and a smile was the one worth remembering. I didn't argue any further.